Mitt Romney. Willard Mitt Romney, born March 12, 1947, is an American businessman, politician, and the Republican Party's nominee for President of the United States in the 2012 election. From 2003 to 2007, he served as the 70th governor of Massachusetts. Raised in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan by his parents Lenore and George W. Romney, Mitt Romney spent 30 months in France as a Mormon missionary beginning in 1966. He married Ann Davies in 1969, with whom he has had 5 children. By 1971, Romney had participated in the political campaigns of both his parents. In that year, he earned a Bachelor of Arts from Brigham Young and in 1975, a Juris Doctor and Master of Business Administration from Harvard. Romney then entered the management consulting industry and in 1977 he secured a position at Bain & Company. Later serving as its chief executive officer, he helped lead the company out of financial crisis. In 1984, he co-founded and led the spin-off company Bain Capital, a highly profitable private equity investment firm that became one of the largest of its kind in the nation. His considerable net worth, Eastern Standard Time made it in 2012 at $190 minus $250 million, helped finance his prior political campaigns. Active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Romney served during his business career as the bishop of his ward, head of his local congregation, and then stake president in his home area near Boston. After stepping down from Bain Capital and his local leadership role in the church, he ran as the Republican candidate in the 1994 Massachusetts election for U.S. Senate. Losing to longtime incumbent Ted Kennedy, he resumed his position at Bain Capital. Hired as the president and CEO of the Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the 2002 Winter Olympics, the resulting visibility enabled Romney to relaunch his political career. Romney won the 2002 gubernatorial election in Massachusetts, and as governor helped develop and enact into law the Massachusetts health care reform legislation, the first of its kind in the nation, which provided near universal health insurance access through state-level subsidies and individual mandates to purchase insurance. He also presided over the elimination of a projected $1.2 minus $1.5 billion deficit through a combination of spending cuts, increased fees, and the closure of corporate tax loopholes. Romney did not seek re-election in 2006, instead focusing on his campaign for the Republican nomination in the 2008 U.S. presidential election. He won several primaries and caucuses but lost the nomination to John McCain. In 2011, he began campaigning for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination, eventually winning enough caucuses and primaries to become the party's presumptive nominee. Formally nominated with his chosen running mate, Representative Paul Ryan, Romney faces incumbent President Barack Obama in the November 2012 general election. Early life and education, heritage and youth. Willard Mitt Romney I was born on March 12, 1947, at Hartford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, to the youngest child of automobile executive George W. Romney and homemaker Lenore Romney, Neela found. His mother was a native of Logan, Utah, and his father was born to American parents in a Mormon colony in Chihuahua, Mexico. 5 Mitt is of primarily English descent, with distant Scottish and German ancestry. 8 a fifth-generation member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints (LDS Church). His great-great-grandfather Miles Romney converted to the faith in its first decade, and another great-great-grandfather, Parley P. Pratt, helped lead the early church. 1911. Younger than his 3 siblings, Margot Lynn, Jane LaFount, and G. Scott, Mitt followed them after a gap of nearly 6 years. 12. His parents named him after a family friend, businessman J. Willard Marriott, and his father's cousin, Milton Mitt Romney, a former quarterback for the Chicago Bears. 13. Mitt was referred to as Billy until kindergarten, when he indicated a preference for the former. 14 and 1953, the family moved from Detroit to the affluent suburb of Bloomfield Hills. 15. His father became the chairman and CEO of American Motors the following year, soon helping the company avoid bankruptcy and return to profitability. 15. By 1959, his father had become a nationally known figure in print and on television. 16. And Mitt idolized him. 17. Romney attended public elementary schools until the 7th grade, when he enrolled as one of only a few Mormon students at Cranbrook School in Bloomfield Hills, a traditional private boys' preparatory school. 14. 18. Many students there came from backgrounds even more privileged than his. 19. Not particularly athletic, he also did not distinguish himself academically. 17. He participated in his father's successful 1962 Michigan gubernatorial campaign. 20. And later worked for him as an intern in the governor's office. 17. 21. Mitt took up residence at Cranbrook when his newly elected father began spending most of his time at the state capitol. 18. At Cranbrook, Romney helped manage the ice hockey team, and he joined the pep squad. 18. During his senior year, he joined the cross-country running team. 14. He belonged to 11 school organizations and school clubs overall, including the Blue Keep Club, a booster group he had started. 18. During his final year there, he improved academically but fell short of excellence. 17. 19. Romney became involved in several pranks while attending Cranbrook. He has since apologized, stating that some of the pranks may have gone too far. NB1. In March of his senior year, he began dating Ann Davies. She attended the private Kingswood School, the sister school to Cranbrook. 1926. The two became informally engaged around the time of his June 1965 graduation. 1722. University, France. Mission, marriage, and children. 1965, 75. Romney attended Stanford University during the academic year of 1965, 66. 17. He was not part of the counterculture of the 1960s then taking form in the San Francisco Bay Area. 17. In May 1966, he joined a counter-protest against a group staging a sit-in at the University Administration Building in opposition to draft status tests. 1727. He continued to enjoy occasional pranks. NB2. In July 1966, he left the U.S. for a 30-month stay in France as a Mormon missionary. 1730. A traditional rite of passage in his family. NB3. He arrived in Lahore, where he faced physical and economic deprivation in cramped quarters. 1032. Rules against drinking, smoking, and dating were strictly enforced. 10. Most individual Mormon missionaries do not gain many converts, NB4, and Romney was no exception. 32. He later estimated 10 to 20 for his entire mission. 37. NB5. He initially became demoralized and later recalled it as the only time when most of what I was trying to do was rejected. 32. He soon gained recognition within the mission for the many homes he called on and the repeat visits he was granted. 10. He was promoted to zone leader in Bordeaux in early 1968, and soon thereafter became assistant to the mission president in Paris. 1032-39. At the mission home, he enjoyed far more comfortable accommodations than he previously had elsewhere in the country. 39. When the French expressed opposition to the U.S. role in the Vietnam War, Romney debated them in return, and their hostility on the subject reinforced Romney's support for the U.S. effort. 1032. In June 1968, an automobile he was driving in southern France was hit by another vehicle, seriously injuring him and killing one of his passengers, the wife of the mission president. NB6. Romney was not at fault in the accident. NB6. He became co-president of a mission that had become demoralized and disorganized after the May 1968 general strike and student uprising in the car accident. 40. With Romney rallying the others, the mission met a goal of 200 baptisms for the year, the most for them in a decade. 40. By the end of his stint in December 1968, he was overseeing the work of 175 others. 3241 As a result of his stay, Romney developed a lifelong affection for France and its people, and continued to be fluent in French. 4344 At their first meeting following his return, Romney and Ann Davies reconnected and decided to get married. 45 Romney began attending Brigham Young University, BYU, where she had been studying. 46 The couple married on March 21, 1969, in a civil ceremony in Bloomfield Hills. 47-48 The following day, they flew to Utah for a Mormon wedding ceremony at the Salt Lake Temple. Ann had converted to the faith while he was away. 47-48 Mitt had missed much of the tumultuous American anti-Vietnam War movement while away in France. Upon his return, it surprised him to learn that his father had joined the movement during his unsuccessful 1968 presidential campaign. 32 George was now serving in President Richard Nixon's cabinet as United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. In a June 1970 newspaper profile of children of cabinet members, Mitt said that U.S. involvement in the war had been misguided. If it wasn't a political blunder to move into Vietnam, I don't know what is, but supported Nixon's ongoing Cambodian incursion as a sincere attempt to bring the war to a conclusion. 49 At that time there was a military draft. Romney had initially received two U.S. student deferments, then, like most Mormon missionaries, a 4-day ministerial deferment while in France, and then 2 more student deferments. 2750 When those ran out, the result of the December 1969 draft lottery ensured he would not be selected. 2750-51 At culturally conservative BYU, Romney remained isolated from much of the upheaval of that era. 3246 He became president of the Cougar Club Booster organization and showed a newfound discipline in his studies. 3246 During his senior year, he took a leave to work as driver and advance man for his mother-in-law Romney's eventually unsuccessful 1970 campaign for U.S. Senator from Michigan. 2247 Together, they visited all 83 Michigan counties. 5253 He earned a Bachelor of Arts in English with highest honors in 1971. 46 Giving commencement addresses to both the College of Humanities and to the whole of BYU. NB7 The Romney's first son, Taggart, was born in 1934 while they were undergraduates at BYU and living in a basement apartment. 46 Ann subsequently gave birth to Matthew, 1971 and Joshua, 1975. Benjamin, 1978 and Craig, 1981 would arrive later, after Romney began his business career. 3-4 Mitt Romney wanted to pursue a business path, but his father advised him that a law degree would be valuable to his career even if he did not become a lawyer. 56-57 Thus, he enrolled in the recently created Joint Juris Doctora Master of Business Administration 4-year program coordinated between Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. 58 He readily adapted to the business school's pragmatic, data-driven case study method of teaching. 57 Living in a Belmont, Massachusetts house with Ann and their 2 children, his social experience in college differed from most of his classmates. 47-57 He was non-ideological and did not involve himself in the political issues of the day. 47-57 He graduated in 1975 cum laude from the law school, in the top third of the class, and was named a Baker Scholar for graduating in the top 5% of his business school class. 54-58 Business career recruited by several firms, Romney joined Boston Consulting Group, BCG, reasoning that working as a management consultant for a variety of companies would better prepare him for a future position as a chief executive. 56-59 NBA part of a 1970s wave of top graduates who chose to go into consulting rather than join a large company directly. 61 He found his legal and business education useful in his job. 56 He applied BCG principles such as the growth share matrix. 62 And executives viewed him as having a bright future there. 5663. In 1977, he was hired by Bain & Company, a management consulting firm in Boston formed a few years earlier by Bill Bain and other ex-BCG employees. 5662-64. Bain would later say of the 30-year-old Romney, he had the appearance of confidence of a guy who was maybe 10 years older. 65. Unlike other consulting firms, which issued recommendations and then departed, Bain & Company immersed itself in a client's business and worked with them until changes were implemented. 5662. Romney became a vice president of the firm in 1978-14 and worked with clients such as the Monsanto Company, Outboard Marine Corporation, Burlington Industries, and Corning Incorporated. 59. Within a few years, the firm considered him one of their best consultants and clients sometimes sought to use him over more senior partners. 5666. Two family incidents during this time later came to light during Romney's political career. A confrontation with the park ranger in 1981 became public in 1994, and benign, and from 2007 on there has been persistent interest in a 1983 family road trip with a dog on the roof. 4768. Private equity. For more details on this topic, see Bain Capital. In 1984, Romney left Bain & Company to co-found the spin-off private equity investment firm, Bain Capital. 69. He had initially refrained from accepting Bill Bain's offer to head the new venture, until Bain rearranged the terms in a complicated partnership structure so that there was no financial or professional risk to Romney. 5665-70. Bain and Romney raised the $37 million in funds needed to start the new operation, which had 7 employees. 5971. Romney held the titles of President 72 and Managing General Partner. 7370. For the sole shareholder of the firm, publications also referred to him as Managing Director or CEO. 75-76-77. Initially, Bain Capital focused on venture capital investments. Romney set up a system in which any partner could veto one of these potential opportunities, and he personally saw so many weaknesses that few venture capital investments were approved in the initial 2 years. 56. The firm's first significant success was a 1986 investment to help start Staples Incorporated, after founder Thomas G. Stembert convinced Romney of the market size for office supplies and Romney convinced others. Bain Capital eventually reaped a nearly 7-fold return on its investment, and Romney sat on the Staples board of directors for over a decade. 56-71-78. Romney soon switched Bain Capital's focus from startups to the relatively new business of leveraged buyouts, buying existing companies with money mostly borrowed from banking institutions using the newly bought company's assets as collateral, then taking steps to improve the company's value, and finally selling those companies once their value peaked, usually within a few years. 56-65. Bain Capital lost money in many of its early leveraged buyouts, but then found deals that made large returns. 56. The firm invested in or acquired Accurite, Brookstone, Domino's Pizza, Sealy Corporation, Sports Authority, and Artisan Entertainment, as well as some lesser-known companies in the industrial and medical sectors. 56-65-79. Much of the firm's profit was earned from a relatively small number of deals. Bain Capital's overall success-to-failure ratio was about even. NB10. Romney discovered few investment opportunities himself, and those that he did, often failed to make money for the firm. 81. Instead, he focused on analyzing the merits of possible deals that others brought forward and on recruiting investors to participate in them once approved. 81. Within Bain Capital, Romney spread profits from deals widely within the firm to keep people motivated, often keeping less than 10% for himself. 82. Data-driven. Romney often played the role of a devil's advocate during exhaustive analysis of whether to go forward with a deal. 56-78. He wanted to drop a Bain Capital hedge fund that initially lost money, but other partners disagreed with him and it eventually gained billions. 56. He opted out of the Artisan Entertainment deal, not wanting to profit from a studio that produced R-rated films. 56. Romney served on the board of directors of Damon Corporation, a medical testing company later found guilty of defrauding the government. Bain Capital tripled its investment before selling off the company, and the fraud was discovered by the new owners. Romney was never implicated. 56. In some cases, Romney had little involvement with a company once acquired. 71. Bain Capital's leveraged buyout sometimes led to layoffs, either soon after acquisition or later after the firm had concluded its role. 62. 71. Exactly how many jobs Bain Capital added compared to those lost because of these investments and buyouts is unknown, owing to a lack of records and Bain Capital's penchant for privacy on behalf of itself and its investors. 83. 84. 85. Maximizing the value of acquired companies and the return to Bain's investors, not job creation, was the firm's fundamental goal. 71. 86. Bain Capital's acquisition of Impact exemplified a deal where it profited handsomely from early payments and management fees, even though the subject company itself ended up going into bankruptcy. 56. 78. 86. Dade Bearing was another case where Bain Capital received an eightfold return on its investment, but the company itself was saddled with debt and laid off over 1,000 employees before Bain Capital exited. The company subsequently went into bankruptcy, with more layoffs, before recovering and prospering. 83. Referring to the layoffs that happened, Romney said in 2007. Sometimes the medicine is a little bigger, but it is necessary to save the life of the patient. My job was to try and make the enterprise successful, and in my view the best security a family can have is that the business they work for is strong. 70. In 1990, facing financial collapse, Bain & Company asked Romney to return. 69. Announced as its new CEO in January 1991, 73. 74. He drew a symbolic salary of $1.69, remaining managing general partner of Bain Capital during this time. 73. 74. He oversaw an effort to restructure Bain & Company's employee stock ownership plan, real estate deals, and bank loans, while rallying the firm's 1,000 employees, imposing a new governing structure that excluded Bain and the other founding partners from control, and increasing fiscal transparency. 56. 59. 69. Within about a year, he had led Bain & Company through a turnaround and returned the firm to profitability. 59. He turned Bain & Company over to new leadership and returned to Bain Capital in December 1992. 56. 87. 88. Romney took a leave of absence from Bain Capital from November 1993 to November 1994 to run for the U.S. Senate. 47. 89. During that time, Impact workers went on strike and asked Romney to intervene. Against the advice of Bain Capital lawyers, Romney met the strikers, but told them he had no position of active authority in the matter. 1991. By 1999, Bain Capital was on its way towards becoming one of the foremost private equity firms in the nation, 70 having increased its number of partners from 5 to 18, with 115 employees overall, and $4 billion under its management. 65. 71. The firm's average annual return on investments was 113%. 59. 92. Romney took a paid leave of absence from Bain Capital in February 1999 to serve as the president and CEO of the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympic Games Organizing Committee. 93. 94. Billed in some public statements as keeping a part-time role. 93. 95. Romney remained the firm's sole shareholder, managing director, CEO, and president, signing corporate and legal documents, attending to his interests within the firm, and conducting prolonged negotiations for the terms of his departure. 93. 96. He did not involve himself in day-to-day operations of the firm or investment decisions for Bain Capital's new private equity funds. 93. 96. He retained his position on several boards of directors during this time and regularly returned to Massachusetts to attend meetings. 97. In August 2001, Romney announced that he would not return to Bain Capital. 98. A separation from the firm concluded in early 2002. 1993 he transferred his ownership to other partners and negotiated an agreement that allowed him to receive a passive profit share as a retired partner in some Bain Capital entities, including buyout and investment funds. 1999 the private equity business continued to thrive, earning him millions of dollars in annual income. 2. Personal wealth. As a result of his business career, by 2007, Romney and his wife had amassed a net worth of between $190 and $250 million. Their wealth remained in the same range as of 2011. 99-100 Most of it has been held in blind trusts since 2003. 99-100 An additional blind trust, valued at $100 million in 2012, exists in the name of the Romneys' children. 101 The trust, created in 1995, allows the Romneys to transfer money to heirs outside their estate, taking advantage of sophisticated tax planning techniques used by high-net-worth families in an effort to defer or reduce their tax burden. 102 Romney has in September IRA worth between $21 million and $102 million. 103 A portion of Romney's financial assets are held in offshore accounts and investments. 104-105 In 2010, Romney and his wife received $21.7 million in income, almost all of it from investments such as dividends, capital gains, and carried interest. 106 For 2010, the Romneys paid about $3 million in federal income taxes, for an effective tax rate of 13.9%. 106 For the years 1990 to 2009, his effective rates were at least 13.7% with an average effective rate of 20.2%. 107 Romney has regularly tithed to the LDS Church, including stock from Bain Capital Holdings. 108-109 In 2010, he and his wife gave $3 million to charity, including $1.5 million to the church. 106 The Romney family's Tyler Charitable Foundation gave out about $650,000 in that year, some of which went to organizations that fight diseases such as cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis. 110 In addition, the Romneys have often donated to LDS Church on BYU. 11 For the years 1990 to 2009, the Romneys' total charitable donations of portions of their income averaged 13.5%. 107 Local LDS Church leadership. During his business career, Romney held several positions in the local lay clergy. In 1977, he became a counselor to the president of the Boston Stake. 111 He served as bishop of the board, ecclesiastical and administrative head of his congregation, at Belmont, Massachusetts, from 1981 to 1986. 112-113 As such, in addition to home teaching, he also formulated Sunday services and classes using LDS scriptures to guide the congregation. 114 After the destruction of the Belmont Meeting House by a fire of suspicious origins in 1984, he forged links with other religious institutions, allowing the congregation to rotate its meetings to other houses of worship during the reconstruction of their building. 108-113 From 1986 to 1994, Romney presided over the Boston Stake, which included more than a dozen wards in eastern Massachusetts with almost 4,000 church members altogether. 66-114-115 He organized a team to handle financial and management issues, sought to counter anti-Mormon sentiments, and tried to solve social problems among poor Southeast Asian converts. 108-113 An unpaid position, his local church leadership often took 30 or more hours a week of his time. 114 And he became known for his considerable energy in the role. 66 He earned a reputation for avoiding any overnight travel that might interfere with his church responsibilities. 114 Romney took a hands-on role in general matters, helping in domestic maintenance efforts, visiting the sick, and counseling burdened church members. 112, 113, 114. A number of local church members later credited him with turning their lives around or helping them through difficult times. 108, 113, 114. Others, rankled by his leadership style, desired a more consensus-based approach. 113. Romney tried to balance the conservative directives from church leadership in Utah with the desire of some Massachusetts members to have a more flexible application of religious doctrine. 66. He agreed with some requests from the liberal women's group Exponent II for changes in the way the church dealt with women, but clashed with women whom he felt were departing too much from doctrine. 66. In particular, he counseled women to not have abortions except in the rare cases allowed by LDS doctrine, and encouraged single women facing unplanned pregnancies to give up their baby for adoption. 66. Romney later said that the years spent as an LDS minister gave him direct exposure to people struggling financially and empathy for those with family problems. 116. 1994 U.S. Senatorial Campaign and Aftermath. For much of his business career, Romney did not take public, political stances. 117. 118. He had kept abreast of national politics since college, 32 though, and the circumstances of his father's presidential campaign loss had irked him for decades. 22. He registered as an independent, 47, and voted in the 1992 presidential primaries for the Democratic former senator from Massachusetts, Paul Tsongas. 117. 119. By 1993, Romney had begun thinking about entering politics, partly based upon Ann's urging and partly to follow in his father's footsteps. 47. He decided to challenge incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy, seeking re-election for the 6th time. Political pundits viewed Kennedy as vulnerable that year, in part because of the unpopularity of the Democratic Congress as a whole, and in part because this was Kennedy's first election since the William Kennedy Smith trial in Florida, in which the senator had suffered some negative public relations regarding his character. 120. 121. 122. Romney changed his affiliation to Republican in October 1993 and formally announced his candidacy in February 1994. 47. In addition to his leave from Bain Capital, he stepped down from his church leadership role in 1994. 114. Radio personality Janet Jagiellon took an early lead in polls among candidates for the Republican nomination for the Senate seat, but Romney proved the most effective fundraiser. 123. 124. He won 68% of the vote at the May 1994 Massachusetts Republican Party convention. Businessman John Lakian finished a distant second, eliminating Jagiellon. 125. Romney defeated Lakian in the September 1994 primary with more than 80% of the vote. 14. 126. In the general election, Kennedy faced the first serious re-election challenger of his career. 120. The younger, telegenic, and well-funded Romney ran as a businessman who stated he had created 10,000 jobs and as a Washington outsider with a solid family image and moderate stances on social issues. 120. 127. When Kennedy tried to tie Romney's policies to those of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, Romney responded, "Look, I was an independent during the time of Reagan-Bush. I'm not trying to take us back to Reagan-Bush." 128. Romney stated, "Ultimately, this is a campaign about change." 129. Romney's campaign was effective in portraying Kennedy as soft on crime, but had trouble establishing its own consistent positions. 130. By mid-September 1994, polls showed the race to be approximately even. 120. 131. 132. Kennedy responded with a series of ads that focused on Romney's seemingly shifting political views on issues such as abortion. 133. Romney would respond on the latter by stating, "I believe that abortion should be safe and legal in this country." 134. Other Kennedy ads centered on layoffs of workers at the Ampag plant owned by Romney's Bain Capital. 120-135. The latter was effective in blunting Romney's momentum. 78. Kennedy and Romney held a widely watched late October debate that had no clear winner, but by then, Kennedy had pulled ahead in polls and stayed ahead afterward. 136. Romney spent $3 million of his own money in the race and more than $7 million overall. 137. And B11. In the November general election, despite a disastrous showing for Democrats nationwide, Kennedy won the election with 58% of the vote to Romney's 41%, 56, the smallest margin in any of Kennedy's re-election campaigns for the Senate. 140. The day after the election, Romney returned to Bain Capital, but the loss had a lasting effect. He told his brother, "I never want to run for something again unless I can win." 47. 141. When his father died in 1995, Mitt donated his inheritance to Bu's George W. Romney Institute of Public Management. 55. He also joined the board, as vice chair, of the Points of Light Foundation, 98, which had incorporated his father's National Volunteer Center. Romney felt restless as the decade neared a close. The goal of simply making more money was becoming inadequate for him. 47. 141. Although no longer in a local leadership position in his church, he still taught Sunday school. 112. During the long and controversial approval and construction process for the $30 million Mormon temple in Belmont, he feared that, as a political figure who had opposed Kennedy, he would become a focal point for opposition to the structure. 113. He thus kept to a limited, behind-the-scenes role in attempts to ease tensions between the church and local residents. 108. 112. 113. 2002 Inter-Olympics. In 1998, Ann Romney learned that she had multiple sclerosis. Mitt described watching her fail a series of neurological tests as the worst day of his life. 47. After experiencing 2 years of severe difficulties with the disease, she found, while living in Park City, Utah, where the couple had built a vacation home, a combination of mainstream, alternative, and equestrian therapies that enabled her to lead a lifestyle mostly without limitations. 142. When her husband received an offer to take over the troubled organization responsible for the 2002 Inter-Olympics and Paralympics, to be held in Salt Lake City in Utah, she urged him to accept it. Eager for a new challenge, as well as another chance to prove himself in public life, he did. 141. 143. 144. On February 11, 1999, the Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games have 2002 hired Romney as their president and CEO. 145. Before Romney took the position, the event was running $379 million short of its revenue goals. 145. Officials had made plans to scale back the games to compensate for the fiscal crisis, and there were fears it might be moved away entirely. 146. Additionally, the image of the games had been damaged by allegations of bribery against top officials including prior committee president and CEO Frank Schleich. The Salt Lake Organizing Committee forced Schleich and committee vice president Dave Johnson to resign. 147. Utah-powered brokers, including Governor Mike Leavitt, searched for someone with a scandal-free reputation to take charge of the Olympics, and chose Romney based on his business and legal expertise as well as his connections to both the LDS Church and the state. 144. 148. The appointment faced some initial criticism from non-Mormons, and fears from Mormons, that it represented cronyism or made the games seem too Mormon-dominated. 38. Romney donated to charity the $1.4 million in salary and severance payments he received for his 3 years as president and CEO, and also contributed $1 million to the Olympics. 149. 149. Romney restructured the organization's leadership and policies. He reduced budgets and boosted fundraising, alleviating the concerns of corporate sponsors while recruiting new ones. 141. 144. Romney worked to ensure the safety of the games following the September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks by coordinating a $300 million security budget. 143. He oversaw a $132 billion total budget, 700 employees, and 26,000 volunteers. 145. The federal government provided approximately $400 million. 144. 150. 151 to $600 million. 152. 153 of the budget, much of it a result of Romney's having aggressively lobbied Congress and federal agencies. 153. 154. It was a record level of federal funding for the staging of a U.S. Olympics. 151. 154. An additional $1.1 billion of indirect federal funding came to the state in the form of highway and transit projects. 155. Romney emerged as the local public face of the Olympic effort, appearing in photographs, in news stories, on collectible Olympics pins depicting Romney wrapped by an American flag, and on buttons carrying phrases like "Hey, Mitt, we love you." 141. 144. 156. Robert H. Garth, the chair of the organizing committee, later said it was obvious that he had an agenda larger than just the Olympics. 141. And that Romney wanted to use the Olympics to propel himself into the national spotlight and a political career. 144. 157. Garth believed the initial budget situation was not as bad as Romney portrayed, given there was still 3 years to reorganize. 144. Utah Senator Bob Bennett said that much of the needed federal money was already in place. 144. An analysis by the Boston Globe later stated that the committee had nearly $1 billion in committed revenues at that time. 144. Olympics critic Steve Pace, who levied on for responsible public spending, thought Romney exaggerated the initial fiscal state to lay the groundwork for a well-publicized rescue. 157. Kenneth Bullock, another board member of the organizing committee and also head of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, often clashed with Romney at the time, and later said that Romney deserved some credit for the turnaround but not as much as he claimed. 141. Bullock said, "He tried very hard to build an image of himself as a savior, the great white hope. He was very good at characterizing and castigating people and putting himself on a pedestal." 144. Despite the initial fiscal shortfall, the Games ended up with a surplus of $100 million. 158. President George W. Bush praised Romney's efforts and 87% of Utahns approved of his performance as Olympics head. 23. 159. It solidified his reputation as a turnaround artist. 144. 160. 161. And Harvard Business School taught a case study based around his actions. 62. U.S. Olympic Committee head William Hybel credited Romney with an extraordinary effort in overcoming a difficult time for the Olympics, culminating in the greatest Winter Games I have ever seen. 144. Romney wrote a book about his experience titled Turnaround, Crisis, Leadership, and the Olympic Games, published in 2004. The role gave Romney experience in dealing with federal, state, and local entities, a public persona he had previously lacked, and the chance to relaunch his political aspirations. 141. Governor of Massachusetts 2002 gubernatorial campaign. In 2002, plagued by political missteps and personal scandals, the administration of Republican acting governor of Massachusetts Jane Swift appeared vulnerable, and many Republicans viewed her as unable to win a general election. 159. 162. Prominent party figures, as well as the White House, wanted Romney to run for governor. 163. 164. And the opportunity appealed to him for reasons including its national visibility. 165. A poll by the Boston Herald showed Republicans favoring Romney over Swift by more than 50 percentage points. 166. On March 19, 2002, Swift announced she would not seek her party's nomination, and hours later Romney declared his candidacy. 166. For which he would face no opposition in the primary. 167. In June 2002, the Massachusetts Democratic Party challenged Romney's eligibility to run for governor, noting that state law required 7 years consecutive residence and that Romney had filed his state tax returns as a Utah resident in 1999 and 2000. 168. 169. In response, the bipartisan Massachusetts State Ballot Law Commission unanimously ruled that he had maintained sufficient financial and personal ties to Massachusetts and was, therefore, an eligible candidate. 170. Romney again ran as a political outsider. 159. He played down his party affiliation. 171. Saying he was not a partisan Republican but rather a moderate with progressive views. 172. He stated that he would observe a moratorium on changes to the state's laws on abortion, but reiterated that he would preserve and protect a woman's right to choose and that his position was unequivocal. 134. 173. He touted his private sector experience as qualifying him for addressing the state's fiscal problems. 167. And stressed his ability to obtain federal funds for the state, offering his Olympics record as evidence. 151. 154. He proposed to reorganize the state government while eliminating waste, fraud, and mismanagement. 171. 174. The campaign innovatively utilized micro-targeting techniques, identifying like-minded groups of voters and reaching them with narrowly tailored messaging. 175. In an attempt to overcome the image that had damaged him in the 1994 Senate race, that of a wealthy corporate buyout specialist out of touch with the needs of regular people, the campaign staged a series of workdays, in which Romney performed blue-collar jobs such as herding cows and baling hay, unloading a fishing boat, and hauling garbage. 174. 176. 177. Television acts highlighting the effort, as well as one portraying his family in gushing terms and showing him shirtless. 176. Received a poor public response and were a factor in his Democratic opponent, Massachusetts State Treasurer Shannon O'Brien, leading in the polls as late as mid-October. 174. 177. He responded with ads that accused O'Brien of being a failed watchdog for state pension fund losses in the stock market and that associated her husband, a former lobbyist, with the Enron scandal. 171. 177. These were effective in capturing independent voters. 177. O'Brien said that Romney's budget plans were unrealistic. The two also differed on capital punishment and bilingual education, with Romney supporting the former and opposing the latter. 178. During the election, Romney contributed more than $6 million, a state record at the time, to the nearly $10 million raised for his campaign overall. 179. 180. On November 5, 2002, Romney won the governorship, earning 50% of the vote to O'Brien's 45%. 181. Tenure, 2003-07. The swearing-in of Romney as the 70th governor of Massachusetts took place on January 2, 2003. 182. He faced a Massachusetts state legislature with large Democratic majorities in both houses, and have picked his cabinet and advisors based more on managerial abilities than partisan affiliation. 183. 184. He declined a governor's salary of $135,000 during his term. 185. Upon entering office in the middle of a fiscal year, he faced an immediate $650 million shortfall and a projected $3 billion deficit for the next year. 171. Unexpected revenue of $1.0 minus $1.3 billion from a previously enacted capital gains tax increase and $500 million in new federal grants decreased the deficit to $1.2 minus $1.5 billion. 186. 187. Through a combination of spending cuts, increased fees, and removal of corporate tax loopholes, 186. The state achieved surpluses of around $600 minus $700 million during Romney's last two full fiscal years in office, although it began running deficits again after that. NB12 Romney supported raising various fees, including those for driver's licenses and gun licenses, to raise more than $300 million. 186 He increased the special gasoline retailer fee by 2 cents per gallon, generating about $60 million per year in additional revenue. 186 Opponents said the reliance on fees sometimes imposed a hardship on those who could least afford them. 186 Romney also closed tax loopholes that brought in another $181 million from businesses over the next 2 years and over $300 million for his term. 171 192 193 He did so in the face of conservative and corporate critics who viewed these actions as tax increases. 192 193 The state legislature, with the governor's support, cut spending by $1.6 billion, including $700 million in reductions in state aid to cities and towns. 194 The cuts also included a $140 million reduction in state funding for higher education, which led state-run colleges and universities to increase fees by 63% over 4 years. 171 186 Romney sought additional cuts in his last year as governor by vetoing nearly 250 items in the state budget. A heavily Democratic legislature overrode all the vetoes. 195 The cuts in state spending put added pressure on localities to reduce services or raise property taxes, and the share of town and city revenues coming from property taxes rose from 49 to 53%. 171 186 The combined state and local tax burden in Massachusetts increased during Romney's governorship. 171 He did propose a reduction in the state income tax rate that the legislature rejected. 196 Romney sought to bring near universal health insurance coverage to the state. This came after Staples founder Stembert told him at the start of his term that doing so would be the best way he could help people. 197 Another factor was that the federal government, owing to the rules of Medicaid funding, threatened to cut $385 million in those payments to Massachusetts if the state did not reduce the number of uninsured recipients of health care services. 198 173 Although the idea of universal health insurance had not come to the fore during the campaign, Romney decided that because people without insurance still received expensive health care, the money spent by the state for such care could be better used to subsidize insurance for the poor. 197 Determined that a new Massachusetts health insurance measure not raise taxes or resembled the previous decade's failed Hillary Care proposal at the federal level, Romney formed a team of consultants from diverse political backgrounds to apply those principles. Beginning in late 2004, they devised a set of proposals that were more ambitious than an incremental one from the Massachusetts Senate and more acceptable to him than one from the Massachusetts House of Representatives that incorporated a new payroll tax. 184 198 173 In particular, Romney pushed for incorporating an individual mandate at the state level. 20 Past rival Ted Kennedy, who had made universal health coverage his life's work and who, over time, had developed a warm relationship with Romney. 199 Gave the plan a positive reception, which encouraged Democratic legislators to cooperate. 198 173 The effort eventually gained the support of all major stakeholders within the state, and Romney helped break a logjam between rival Democratic leaders in the legislature. 198 173 On April 12, 2006, the governor signed the resulting Massachusetts health reform law, commonly called Romneycare, which requires nearly all Massachusetts residents to buy health insurance coverage or face escalating tax penalties, such as the loss of their personal income tax exemption. 200 The bill also established means-tested state subsidies for people who lacked adequate employer insurance and whose income was below a threshold, using funds that had covered the health costs of the uninsured. 201-202 he vetoed 8 sections of the health care legislation, including a controversial $295 per employee assessment on businesses that do not offer health insurance and provisions guaranteeing dental benefits to Medicaid recipients. 203 the legislature overrode all 8 vetoes, but the governor's office said that differences were not essential. 203 the law was the first of its kind in the nation and became the signature achievement of Romney's term in office. 173 NB 13 at the beginning of his governorship, Romney opposed same-sex marriage and civil unions, but advocated tolerance and supported some domestic partnership benefits. 173 205 206 A November 2003 Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decision required the state to recognize same-sex marriages. Goodrich v. Department of Public Health. 207 Romney reluctantly backed the state constitutional amendment in February 2004 that would have banned those marriages but still allowed civil unions, viewing it as the only feasible way to accomplish the former. 207 in May 2004, in compliance with the court decision, the governor instructed town clerks to begin issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. However, citing a 1913 law that barred out-of-state residents from getting married in Massachusetts if their union would be illegal in their home state, he said no marriage licenses were to be issued to those people not planning to move to Massachusetts. 205-208 In June 2005, Romney abandoned his support for the Compromise Amendment, stating that it confused voters who opposed both same-sex marriage and civil unions. 205 Instead, he endorsed a ballot initiative led by the Coalition for Marriage and Family, an alliance of socially conservative organizations, that would have banned same-sex marriage and made no provisions for civil unions. 205 In 2004 and 2006, he urged the U.S. Senate to vote in favor of the federal marriage amendment. 209-210 In 2005, Romney revealed a change of view regarding abortion, moving from the pro-choice positions expressed during his 1994 and 2002 campaigns to a pro-life one in opposition to Roe v. Wade. 173 Romney attributed his conversion to an interaction with Harvard University biologist Douglas Melton, an expert on embryonic stem cell biology, although Melton vehemently disputed Romney's recollection of their conversation. 211 Romney subsequently vetoed a bill on pro-life grounds that expanded access to emergency contraception in hospitals and pharmacies. The legislature overrode the veto. 212 He also amended his position on embryonic stem cell research itself. NB 14 Romney used a bully pulpit approach towards promoting his agenda, staging well-organized media events to appeal directly to the public rather than pushing his proposals in behind-doors sessions with the state legislature. 173 He dealt with a public crisis of confidence in Boston's Big Dig project that followed a fatal ceiling collapse in 2006 by wresting control of the project from the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority. 173 After 2 years of negotiating the state's participation in the Landmark Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that instituted a cap-and-trade arrangement for power plant emissions in the Northeast, Romney pulled Massachusetts out of the initiative shortly before its signing in December 2005, citing a lack of cost limits for industry. 213 During 2004, Romney spent considerable effort trying to bolster the state Republican Party, but it failed to gain any seats in the state legislative elections that year. 171-214 Given a primetime appearance at the 2004 Republican National Convention, political figures began discussing him as a potential 2008 presidential candidate. 215 Midway through his term, Romney decided that he wanted to stage a full-time run for president. 216 And on December 14, 2005, announced that he would not seek re-election for a second term. 217 As chair of the Republican Governors Association, Romney traveled around the country, meeting prominent Republicans and building a national political network. 216 He spent all, or parts of, more than 200 days out of state during 2006, preparing for his run. 218. The governor had a 61% job approval rating in public polls after his initial fiscal actions in 2003, although his approval rating subsequently declined. 219. Driven in part by his frequent out-of-state travel. 219. 220. Romney's approval rating stood at 34% in November 2006, ranking 48th of the 50 U.S. governors. 221. Dissatisfaction with Romney's administration and the weak condition of the Republican state party were among several factors contributing to Democrat Deval Patrick's 20-point win over Republican Carrie Healey, Romney's lieutenant governor, in the 2006 Massachusetts gubernatorial election. 220. 222. Romney filed to register a presidential campaign committee with the Federal Election Commission on his penultimate day in office as governor. 223. His term ended January 4, 2007. 2008 presidential campaign. Romney formally announced his candidacy for the 2008 Republican nomination for president on February 13, 2007, in Dearborn, Michigan. 224. Again casting himself as a political outsider. 225. His speech frequently invoked his father and his family, and stressed experiences in the private, public, and voluntary sectors that had brought him to this point. 224. 226. The campaign emphasized Romney's highly profitable career in the business world and his stewardship of the Olympics. 216. 227 and B15. He also had political experience as a governor, together with a political pedigree courtesy of his father, as well as many biographical parallels with him. NB16. And Romney, who had become an advocate for those with multiple sclerosis. 233. Was in remission and would be an active participant in his campaign. 234. Helping to soften his political personality. 235. Media stories referred to the 6-foot, -2-inch, 1.88 meters, Romney as handsome. 236. 237. Moreover, a number of commentators noted that with his square jaw and ample hair graying at the temples, he physically matched one of the common images of what a president should look like. 69. 238. 239. Romney's liabilities included having run for senator and serving as governor in one of the nation's most liberal states and having taken positions in opposition to the party's conservative base during that time. 216. 227. 234. Late during his term as governor, he had shifted positions and emphases to better align with traditional conservatives on social issues. 216. 227. 234. Skeptics, including some Republicans, charged Romney with opportunism and a lack of core principles. 119. 173. 240. As a Mormon, he faced suspicion and skepticism by some in the evangelical portion of the party. 240. For his campaign, Romney assembled a veteran group of Republican staffers, consultants, and pollsters. 227. 241. He was little known nationally, though, and stayed around the 10% support range in Republican preference polls for the first half of 2007. 216. He proved the most effective fundraiser of any of the Republican candidates and also partly financed his campaign with his own personal fortune. 227. 242. These resources, combined with the mid-year near collapse of nominal front-runner John McCain's campaign, made Romney a threat to win the nomination and the focus of the other candidates' attacks. 243. Romney's staff suffered from internal strife. The candidate himself was at times indecisive, often asking for more data before making a decision. 227. 244. During all of his political campaigns, Romney has avoided speaking publicly about Mormon doctrines, referring to the U.S. Constitution's prohibition of religious tests for public office. 245. But persistent questions about the role of religion in Romney's life, as well as Southern Baptist minister and former governor of Arkansas Mike Huckabee's rise in the polls based upon an explicitly Christian-themed campaign, led to the December 6, 2007, Faith in America speech. 246 In the speech Romney declared, "I believe in my Mormon faith and endeavor to live by it. My faith is the faith of my fathers. I will be true to them and to my beliefs." 11 Romney added that he should neither be elected nor rejected based upon his religion. 247 And echoed Senator John F. Kennedy's famous speech during his 1960 presidential campaign in saying, "I will put no doctrine of any church above the plain duties of the office and the sovereign authority of the law." 246 Instead of discussing the specific tenets of his faith, he said he would be informed by it, stating, "Freedom requires religion just as religion requires freedom. Freedom and religion endure together or perish alone." 247 Academics would later study the role religion had played in the campaign. NB 17 The campaign strategy called for winning the initial two contests, the January 3, 2008, Iowa Republican caucuses and the adjacent to his home state January 8 New Hampshire primary, and propelling Romney nationally. 250 However, he took second place in both, losing Iowa to a vastly outspent Huckabee who received more than twice the evangelical Christian votes, 252 and losing New Hampshire to the resurgent McCain. 251 Huckabee and McCain criticized Romney's image as a flip-flopper. 251 And this label would stick to Romney through the campaign. 227 One that Romney rejected as unfair and inaccurate, except for his acknowledged change of mind on abortion. 253 Romney seemed to approach the campaign as a management consulting exercise, and showed a lack of personal warmth and political feel. Journalist Evan Thomas wrote that Romney came off as a phony, even when he was perfectly sincere. 254 The fervor with which Romney adopted his new stances and attitudes contributed to the perception of inauthenticity which hampered the campaign. 255 Romney's staff would conclude that competing as a candidate of social conservatism and ideological purity rather than of pragmatic competence had been a mistake. 235 A win by McCain over Huckabee in South Carolina, and by Romney over McCain in childhood home Michigan, set up a pivotal battle in the Florida primary. 257 Romney campaigned intensively on economic issues and the burgeoning subprime mortgage crisis, while McCain attacked Romney regarding Iraq policy and benefited from endorsements from Florida office holders. 257 McCain won a 5 percentage point victory on January 29. 257 Although many Republican officials were now lining up behind McCain, 257 Romney persisted through the nationwide Super Tuesday contests on February 5. There he won primaries or caucuses in several states, but McCain won in more and in larger population ones. 258 Trailing McCain in delegates by a more than 2-to-1 margin, Romney announced the end of his campaign on February 7. 258 Altogether, Romney had won 11 primaries and caucuses, 259 receiving about 4.7 million votes, 260 and garnering about 280 delegates. 261 He spent $110 million during the campaign, including $45 million of his own money. 262 Romney endorsed McCain for president a week later. 261 And McCain had Romney on a short list for vice presidential running mate, where his business experience would have balanced one of McCain's weaknesses. 263 McCain, behind in the polls, opted instead for a high-risk, high-reward game-changer, selecting Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. 264 McCain lost the election to Democratic Senator Barack Obama. Activity between presidential campaigns. Romney supported the Bush administration's troubled asset relief program in response to the late 2000s financial crisis, later saying that it prevented the U.S. financial system from collapsing. 265-266 During the U.S. automotive industry crisis of 2008-10, he opposed a bailout of the industry in the form of direct government intervention, and argued that a managed bankruptcy of struggling automobile companies should instead be accompanied by federal guarantees for post-bankruptcy financing from the private sector. 267 Following the 2008 election, Romney laid the groundwork for a likely 2012 presidential campaign by using his Free and Strong America Political Action Committee (PAC) to raise money for other Republican candidates and pay his existing political staff's salaries and consulting fees. 268-269 A network of former staff and supporters around the nation were eager for him to run again. 270 He continued to give speeches and raise funds for Republicans. 271 But fearing overexposure, turned down many potential media appearances. 253 He also spoke before business, educational, and motivational groups. 272 From 2009 to 2011, he served on the board of directors of Marriott International, founded by his namesake J. Willard Marriott. 273 He had previously served on it from 1993 to 2002. 273 and B18 In 2009, the Romneys sold their primary residence in Belmont and their ski chalet in Utah, leaving them an estate along Lake Winnipesaukee in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, and an oceanfront home in the La Jolla district of San Diego, California, which they had purchased the year before. 253 276 277 The San Diego home proved beneficial in location and climate for Ann Romney's multiple sclerosis therapies and for recovering from her late 2008 diagnosis of mammary ductal carcinoma in situ and subsequent lumpectomy. 276 278 279 Both at Ann and New Hampshire location were near some of their grandchildren. 276 who by 2012 numbered 18. 280 Romney maintained his voting registration in Massachusetts, however, and bought a smaller condominium in Belmont during 2010. 278 281 In February 2010, Romney had a minor altercation with fellow member Skylar Gardy, known as Sky Blue, on an airplane flight. NB19 Romney released his book, No Apology: The Case for American Greatness, in March 2010, and undertook an 18-state book tour to promote the work. 285 In the book, Romney writes of his belief in American exceptionalism. 286 And presents his economic and geopolitical views rather than anecdotes about his personal or political life. 286 287 It debuted atop the New York Times bestseller list. 288 Romney donated his earnings from the book to charity. 100 Immediately following the March 2010 passage of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Romney attacked the landmark legislation as an unconscionable abuse of power and said the act should be repealed. 289 The antipathy Republicans felt for it created a potential problem for the former governor, since the new federal law was in many ways similar to the Massachusetts health care reform passed during Romney's term. As one Associated Press article stated, Obamacare looks a lot like Romneycare. 289 While acknowledging that his plan was an imperfect work in progress, Romney did not back away from it. He defended the state-level health insurance mandate that underpinned it, calling the bill the right answer to Massachusetts' problems at the time. 289 290 291 In nationwide opinion polling for the 2012 Republican presidential primaries, Romney led her placed in the top three with Palin and Huckabee. A January 2010 National Journal survey of political insiders found that a majority of Republican insiders and a plurality of Democratic insiders predicted Romney would be the party's 2012 nominee. 292 Romney campaigned heavily for Republican candidates in the 2010 midterm elections, 293 raising more money than the other prospective 2012 Republican presidential candidates. 294 Beginning in early 2011, Romney presented a more relaxed visual image, including more casual attire. 255-295 2012 Presidential Campaign Main article. Mitt Romney Presidential Campaign 2012. See also. Republican Party Presidential Primaries 2012. On April 11, 2011, Romney announced, via videotaped outdoors at the University of New Hampshire, that he had formed an exploratory committee for a run for the Republican presidential nomination. 296-297 As Quinnipiac University political science professor Scott McLean stated, "We all knew that he was going to run. He's really been running for president ever since the day after the 2008 election." 297 Romney stood to benefit from the Republican electorate's tendency to nominate candidates who had previously run for president, and thus appeared to be next in line to be chosen. 270, 298, 299 The early stages of the race found him as the apparent front-runner in a weak field, especially in terms of fundraising prowess and organization. 300, 301, 302 Perhaps his greatest hurdle in gaining the Republican nomination was party opposition to the Massachusetts health care reform law that he had shepherded 5 years earlier. 295, 297, 299 As many potential Republican candidates with star power and fundraising ability decided not to run, including Mike Pence, John Thune, Haley Barbour, Mike Huckabee, and Mitch Daniels, Republican Party figures search for plausible alternatives to Romney. 300, 302 On June 2, 2011, Romney formally announced the start of his campaign. Speaking on a farm in Stratham, New Hampshire, he focused on the economy and criticized President Obama's handling of it. 303 He said, "In the campaign to come, the American ideals of economic freedom and opportunity need a clear and unapologetic defense, and I intend to make it, because I have lived it." 299 Romney raised $56 million during 2011, more than double the amount raised by any of his Republican opponents. 304 And refrained from spending his own money on the campaign. 305 He initially pursued a low-key, low-profile strategy. 306 Michelle Bachmann staged a brief surge in polls, which preceded a poll surge in September 2011 by Rick Perry, who had entered the race the month before. 307 Perry and Romney exchanged sharp criticisms of each other during a series of debates among the Republican candidates. 308 The October 2011 decisions of Chris Christie and Sarah Palin not to run effectively settled the field of candidates. 309 310 Perry faded after poor performances in those debates, while Herman Cain's long shot big gained popularity until allegations of sexual misconduct derailed it. 311 312 Romney continued to seek support from a wary Republican electorate. At this point in the race, his poll numbers were relatively flat and at a historically low level for a Republican frontrunner. 309 313 314 After the charges of flip-flopping that marked his 2008 campaign began to accumulate again, Romney declared in November 2011, "I've been as consistent as human beings can be." 315 316 317 In the final months before voting began, Newt Gingrich experienced a significant surge, taking a solid lead in national polls and most of the early caucus and primary states. 318 Before settling back into parity at worst was Romney following a barrage of negative ads from Restore Our Future, a pro-Romney super PAC. 319 In the initial contest, the 2012 Iowa caucuses of January 3, election officials announced Romney as ahead with 25% of the vote, edging out a late-gaining Rick Santorum by 8 votes, and also strong Ron Paul finished third. 320 16 days later, however, they certified Santorum as the winner by a 34-vote margin. 321 A week after the Iowa caucuses, Romney earned a decisive win in the New Hampshire primary with a total of 39% of the vote. Paul finished second and John Huntsman third. 322. In the run-up to the South Carolina Republican primary, Gingrich launched ads criticizing Romney for causing job losses while at Bain Capital. Parry referred to Romney's role there as vulture capitalism, and Sarah Palin pressed Romney to prove his claim that he created 100,000 jobs during that time. 323-324 Many conservatives rallied in defense of Romney, rejecting what they inferred as criticism of free market capitalism. 323 During two debates in the state, Romney fumbled questions about releasing his income tax returns, while Gingrich gained support with audience-rousing attacks on the debate moderators. 325-326 Romney's double-digit lead in state polls evaporated. He lost to Gingrich by 13 points in the January 21 primary. 325 Combined with the delayed loss in Iowa, Romney's admitted poor week represented a lost chance to end the race early, and he quickly decided to release 2 years of his tax returns. 325-327 The race turned to the Florida Republican primary, wearing debates, appearances, and advertisements. Romney launched a sustained barrage against Gingrich's past record and associations and current electability. 328-329 Romney enjoyed a large spending advantage from both his campaign and his aligned Super PAC, and after a record-breaking rate of negative ads from both sides, Romney won Florida on January 31, gaining 46% of the vote to Gingrich's 32%. 330 Several caucuses and primaries took place during February, and Santorum won 3 in a single night early in the month, propelling him into the lead in national and some state polls and positioning him as Romney's chief rival. 331 days later, Romney told the Conservative Political Action Conference that he had been a severely conservative governor. 332 While during his term in 2005 he had maintained that his positions were moderate and characterized reports that he was shifting to the right to attract conservative votes, a media distortion. 333 Romney won the other 5 February contests, including a closely fought one in his home state of Michigan at the end of the month. 334-335 In the Super Tuesday primaries and caucuses of March 6, Romney won 6 of 10 contests, including a narrow victory in Ohio over a vastly outspent Santorum. Although his victories were not enough to end the race, they were enough to establish a 2-to-1 delegate lead over Santorum. 336 Romney maintained his delegate margin through subsequent contests. 337 And Santorum suspended his campaign on April 10. 338 Following a sweep of 5 more contests on April 24, the Republican National Committee put its resources to work for Romney as the party's presumptive nominee. 339 Romney clinched a majority of the delegates with a win in the Texas primary on May 29. Polls have consistently indicated a tight race for the November general election. 340 negative ads from both sides dominated the campaign, with Obama's proclaiming that Romney shipped jobs overseas while at Bain Capital and kept money in offshore tax havens and Swiss bank accounts. 341 A related issue dealt with Romney's purported responsibility for actions at Bain Capital after taking the Olympics post. 94-96 Romney faced demands from Democrats to release additional years of his tax returns, an action a number of Republicans also felt would be wise. After being adamant that he would not do that, he released summaries of them in late September. 107-342 In July 2012, Romney visited the United Kingdom, Israel, and Poland, meeting leaders in an effort to raise his credibility as a world statesman. 343 Comments Romney made about the readiness of the 2012 Summer Olympics were perceived as undiplomatic by the British press. 344-345 Israeli Prime Minister and former BCG colleague Benjamin Netanyahu embraced Romney, though some Palestinians criticized him for suggesting that Israel's culture led to their greater economic success. 346 On August 11, 2012, the Romney campaign announced the selection of Representative Paul Ryan of Wisconsin as his vice presidential running mate. 347. On August 28, 2012, the 2012 Republican National Convention in Tampa, Florida, officially nominated Romney as their candidate for the presidency. 348. Romney is the first Mormon to become a major party presidential nominee. 349. In mid-September, a video surfaced of Romney speaking before a group of supporters in which he stated that 47% of the nation pays no income tax, or dependent on the federal government, see themselves as victims, and will support President Obama unconditionally. Romney went on to say, "My job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives." 350. 351. After facing criticism about the tone and accuracy of these comments, he at first characterized them as inelegantly stated, then a couple of weeks later commented, "I said something that's just completely wrong." 352. The first of three 2012 presidential election debates took place on October 3 in Denver. Media figures and political analysts widely viewed Romney as having delivered a stronger and more focused presentation than did President Obama. 352. 353. Political positions. See also. Political positions have Mitt Romney. In addition to calling for cuts in federal government spending to help reduce the national debt, 354. Romney has proposed gradually raising the eligibility ages for receipt of Social Security, Medicare, and other entitlement program benefits. 354. He favors substantial increases in military spending and promises to invest more heavily in military weapons programs while increasing the number of active-duty military personnel. 355. 356. He was very supportive of the directions taken by the budget proposals of Paul Ryan, although he later proposed his own budget plan which, for example, lowers tax rates within existing brackets instead of adopting Ryan's idea of collapsing 6 income tax brackets into 2. 357. 358. 359. Romney pledges to lead an effort to repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and replace it with a system that gives states more control over Medicare and makes health insurance premiums tax-advantaged for individuals in the same way they are for businesses. 360. He favors repeal of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that intends to replace them with what he calls a streamlined, modern regulatory framework. 361. 362. He has also promised to seek income tax law changes that he says would help to lower federal deficits and would stimulate economic growth. These include reducing individual income tax rates across the board by 20%, maintaining the Bush administration-era tax rate of 15% on investment income from